The NATO summit is underway in Lithuania. Yesterday we told you Sweden and Ukraine would dominate affairs. Now you can strike off Sweden. Because Turkish President Erdogan has relented. He's agreed to support Sweden's membership. Why? Well, only he can answer that question. The decision was announced late on Monday. The NATO chief held talks with Erdogan and the Swedish Prime Minister. This was a last-ditch effort and it worked. You see, Turkey had been stalling Sweden's entry since last year. The reasons were mostly political. Sweden is home to a lot of Kurdish migrants. Erdogan calls them terrorists, and his demand was quite simple. Extradite the Kurds and we'll clear the membership. That's what he wanted. Did Sweden agree? Well, they did amend their constitution, but most of the extraditions were struck down by their courts. So that demand was not fulfilled to send the Kurds back to Turkey. Then yesterday, Erdogan came up with another demand. We will agree only if the European Union gives Turkey a membership. So he wanted Turkey to be an EU member. Again, no luck. It did not happen. The EU said those are two separate issues, which makes you wonder, why did Erdogan agree after all? Well, he could be getting some F-16 jets. These are American jets. Their sale was blocked in 2019 because Turkey bought Russian missiles. But today, the White House cleared it.
It's in the interest of NATO that Turkey get that capability. He has placed no caveats or conditions on that in his public and private comments over the past few months, and he intends to move forward with that transfer in consultation with Congress.
So basically, Erdogan asked for the stars, but he settled for a light bulb. You could say it's a downgrade, but without this brinkmanship, even the F-16 jets were unlikely. Either way, Sweden is a non-issue now. It will become the 32nd member of NATO. But no such luck for Ukraine. NATO is divided on Ukraine's membership. President Zelensky wants to become a de facto member. The NATO chief wants a clear and positive message. And the US is talking about some vague pathway to membership. Listen to this.
When we applied for membership of NATO, we spoke frankly. De facto, Ukraine is already in the alliance. Our weapons are the weapons of the alliance. Our values are what the alliance believes in.
On the membership issue, I also expect that allies will send a clear and positive message on the path forward towards membership for Ukraine.
That the question is not Ukraine and NATO now here at Vilnius. The question is, what's the pathway towards Ukraine's future membership?
For Ukraine, it's all about time. There is no point in saying that Kiev can join 10 years later, or in giving them a checklist that could take 15 years to fulfill. Zelensky wants to join now. Unfortunately, his chances are not good. The US says it's premature for Ukraine to join. Germany says a country at war cannot join. And Hungary says, be rational, don't invite Ukraine. So where does that leave Kiev? In a bit of a limbo. Barring a major surprise, they're not getting a green light in Vilnius. It's politics, so we can't rule it out completely. But logic says no membership for Ukraine. It seems Zelensky has also realized this. Take a look at his statement. This is what he said. It's unprecedented and absurd when time frame is not set either for the invitation or for Ukraine's membership. It seems there is no readiness to invite Ukraine to NATO or to make it a member of the alliance. So what can Zelensky realistically hope for? Words and weapons. Chances are NATO leaders will wax eloquent about shared values and democracy, the usual stuff. They're also expected to announce weapons packages. Germany is preparing a package worth $700 million. It includes ammunition, armored vehicles, and tanks. The US has announced an $800 million package. This one includes the controversial cluster bombs. And France is giving long-range missiles. It's the first time Paris is sending such weapons.
Considering the situation and the counteroffensive led by Ukraine, I decided to increase the deliveries of weapons and equipment and to provide a long-range missile capacity to Ukrainians.
So the message from Vilnius is quite clear. We'll give you moral support. We'll also give you weapons. But we won't give you NATO membership. Unless Biden makes a U-turn like Erdogan, this is where things stand. This whole war was about joining NATO. Ukraine said it wanted to join. Russia said we won't let you join. It's been 500 days and counting since the disagreement triggered this war. Zelensky may say Ukraine is defending human values, but values don't win wars. You see, military operations are not just about the battlefield. They're also about political objectives. Putin's political objective was to turn Ukraine away from NATO. He failed spectacularly. Zelensky's political objective was to join NATO. He too is on the brink of failure, which makes you wonder, who is winning this war? The ones dying on the battlefield or the ones bankrolling the fight? Around the world, a race is underway. A race to build the most advanced chips, not the snack, but the semiconductors. These chips are the brains of modern-day electronics. They power every gadget that you use. They are a strategic asset. They also make a very lucrative business, an industry worth over $500 billion. Now, India wants a slice of this pie, but India's ambitions have suffered a blow. A major joint venture has collapsed. Vedanta and Foxconn have decided to part ways. They announced a partnership last year, a joint venture. The plan was to set up a factory to manufacture chips. The deal was worth $19.5 billion. Now it has collapsed. The question is why? Why did the deal go sour? India wants to become a hub for building chips. Will this setback hurt New Delhi's plans? That's what we'll discuss tonight, starting with the latest. Foxconn and Vedanta called off their joint venture yesterday. Foxconn is a Taiwanese company, a major electronics manufacturer. Vedanta is an Indian company, a leading natural resources conglomerate. They joined hands in September last year. Foxconn had the expertise in technology. Vedanta understood the raw material needs. It also knew how to operate in India. So it looked like the perfect partnership, at least on paper. Turns out it wasn't. Their joint venture lacked an important ingredient, the know-how of building chips. What they needed was a technology partner, and they did look for one. Reports say a European company had been identified, but the talks remained deadlocked. Apparently, this player wanted more skin in the game. In the end, it did not work out, and the deal fell apart. India's Minister for Electronics and IT spoke about this. His name is Rajiv Chandrasekhar, and this is what he said, I'm quoting, "It was well known that both companies had no prior semiconductor experience or technology and were expected to source fab tech from a tech partner." That did not happen. Vedanta and Foxconn had submitted a proposal. They were seeking permissions for a factory, but without a technology partner, they couldn't move ahead. So the joint venture has collapsed. Now that is the official explanation. But there could be more to this story. Since the joint venture was announced, the plan saw repeated changes. Initially, the state of Maharashtra was chosen to set up the factory. This was in July 2022. But in September, the project was moved to Gujarat. Apparently, they offered better incentives. Then there were regulatory troubles. Last month, Vedanta was fined. India's markets regulator SEBI imposed a penalty. This was over the semiconductor joint venture. SEBI said Vedanta did not disclose its partnership with Foxconn in the right manner. And Vedanta was asked to cough up around $36,000. And now, about 2 weeks later, the whole thing has been called off. So what looked like the perfect deal became a series of hurdles. No partners, no permissions, and now no deal. Like I said, we don't know the full story yet. Vedanta and Foxconn say they want to work independently. India's Communication Minister Ashwini Vaishnav has said, and I'm quoting, "Both Foxconn and Vedanta are committed to India's semiconductor mission." Vedanta says it has other partners lined up. In fact, let me quote from their statement. "We will continue to grow our semiconductor team. India remains pivotal in repositioning global semiconductor supply chains." What about Foxconn? They say they're evaluating their options and they want to establish what they call, and I'm quoting, "a diversity of local partners." In fact, let's look at the full statement. Foxconn is committed to India and sees the country successfully establishing a robust semiconductor manufacturing ecosystem. But it doesn't mean the Taiwanese giant is exiting India. They have other operations. Foxconn makes Apple products like iPhones in India. It has a factory in the southern state of Tamil Nadu. Recently, Foxconn said it will make 20 million iPhone units there, plus employ around 100,000 people. Foxconn also has plans to build a new factory in Karnataka. Having said that, these are all assembly plants. India wants to graduate to manufacturing, and it has just the right conditions. So the plans have not been derailed, they say, but they'll certainly be delayed. And to that extent, it is a setback. You see, India is very keen to position itself as a global electronics manufacturing hub. It has just the right conditions, a big market, a large and young workforce, and enough space to accommodate large projects, both physically and politically. For the longest time, China had this advantage, but American sanctions and geopolitical tensions are forcing companies to look for alternatives. And this is where India comes in. This is where India stands a chance. The government senses an opportunity. It wants to attract global players. It is focusing on the production of electronics, both for domestic consumption and for exports. In fact, the government has launched special manufacturing schemes, offered incentives worth over $6 billion. Some projects have already taken off, like the one to make smartphones in India. Companies like Apple have latched onto these incentives. They now want to make 18% of their iPhones in India. Same for chip manufacturing. Similar incentives are on offer. In fact, recently a major deal was announced. US chip maker Micron will set up a plant in India. The project is worth $2.7 billion. So it's all going in the right direction. But what we have so far are small wins. India has not been able to get the big players. Foxconn and Vedanta are parting ways. Intel has not spelled out any clear plans vis-a-vis India. Neither has TSMC, that's Taiwan's Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation. Now, these are the big guns. They will have to be roped in. It's okay to start with assembling electronics, but to win this game, you have to move to manufacturing and eventually to chip design. So this is a setback, and India has a long way to go. You just saw those pictures from Beijing. Xi Jinping held delegation-level talks with the Solomon Islands. Big, long tables on both sides. Also, lots of diplomats and bureaucrats in attendance. But one big name was missing. China's foreign minister, Qin Gang. He should have been part of the Chinese team on Monday, but he was not there. In fact, he's been missing for 2 weeks. His last public appearance was on the 25th of June. He met with officials from Sri Lanka, Russia and Vietnam. Last week, Qin Gang was supposed to host Joseph Borrell. He is the European Union's top diplomat, but the meeting never happened. China postponed it, saying the dates were no longer available. Fishy, right? Well, people started noticing it. Multiple reports emerged questioning Qin Gang's absence. Was he sick? Was he missing? Or was he sidelined? At first, China did not say anything. The foreign ministry claimed it wasn't even aware of such reports. But earlier today, they made a U-turn. Beijing said Qin Gang would not attend the upcoming ASEAN-China meeting. Why? Because of health reasons, they say.
State Councillor and Foreign Minister Qin Gang cannot attend this ASEAN ministerial meeting.
So no Qin Gang. Instead, Wang Yi will represent China. You may remember him, the previous foreign minister, still very powerful in China. He heads the Communist Party's foreign policy wing, which actually makes it a strange equation. When leaders visit Beijing, they meet Qin Gang and Wang Yi. Antony Blinken did this last month. So did Russia's Sergei Lavrov in February. And there's a lot of overlap between these two men. Qin Gang is the government's foreign policy chief, the foreign minister of China. Wang Yi is the Communist Party's foreign policy chief. But in protocol, Wang Yi ranks higher. Why is that? I guess it's party over country in China. Either way, the foreign minister is still on leave. The ASEAN meetings are on Friday, so his absence will last at least 3 weeks. In many ways, this whole incident sums up China and how they operate. You cancel a foreign visit without saying why. You dismiss reports about your top diplomat's health. Then hours later, you confirm all of that with one sentence. Most countries would have just released a statement, perhaps avoided all the speculation, but not China. Their first instinct is to hide and dismiss. And this practice goes right up the command chain. Let's rewind to the Wuhan virus pandemic. By 2021, most world leaders had been vaccinated. In fact, they got their shots on live TV. Guess who did not? Xi Jinping of China. Beijing would not even say if their president was vaccinated or not. It was only in July 2022 that they confirmed it. The obvious question again is why? Why does China keep hiding the health of its leaders? Some experts blame insecurity. Remember, these are unelected presidents and ministers. If they're seen as weak and unhealthy, their position can be challenged. Another reason could be instinct. We've seen it over the years. China's government first hides, then it blames others. We saw it with the pandemic. We also saw it during the recent spy balloon saga. So nothing to be surprised here, but it will be interesting to see when Qin Gang returns. He took over as a foreign minister last year. Before that, he was China's ambassador to the US. Rumor is he's a fierce wolf warrior. So aggression and insults come naturally to him. If only transparency came just as easily, we could have avoided this mess. Either way, We'll be looking out for his next appearance. Our next story is from Sri Lanka, and this is a very important week for them. The first anniversary of the anti-Rajapaksa protest. You may remember these pictures. The presidential palace in Colombo was overrun. Protesters were lounging inside. Then President Gotabaya Rajapaksa was on the run. That was a tricky moment for Sri Lanka. It was a 50-50 situation. Anything could have happened. The country could have descended into absolute anarchy, or it could have rebuilt with patience. Thankfully, the latter happened. Sri Lanka is on the road to recovery. It's not like the economy is booming, but at least there is political and social stability, and India has played a key role in that. New Delhi gave Sri Lanka assistance worth $4 billion. It also batted for Colombo at the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. So it's now time for the next step, to rebuild the economy. India's Foreign Secretary Vinay Quatra landed in Colombo on Monday. His mission is twofold. One, to review the progress of Indian projects. And two, chart out President Ranil Wickremesinghe's trip to India. He is expected to arrive later this month on the 21st of July. It's his first trip to India after taking office last year. Quite the delay, in fact. He was invited by Foreign Minister Jaishankar in January, but for 6 months the trip did not happen. Now, Wickremesinghe is no stranger in New Delhi. He's been Prime Minister 5 times. He's engaged with multiple Indian governments in the past, but this time the stakes are much higher. So what does the Sri Lankan president hope to achieve? Well, two things. One is getting money from India, and two, addressing India's concerns about China. Let's deal with the first one first. Sri Lanka needs financial support. The restructuring of loans. It is hoping for Indian investment, especially in energy, power and ports, and these are all crucial sectors. Both sides are keen on Trincomalee. It's a city in northeastern Sri Lanka. It is already home to a harbour. India and Sri Lanka are looking to convert it into a major port. On Sunday, an Indian diplomat in Colombo promised to keep supporting Sri Lanka. He said India will play a constructive role. So that's one agenda item. Wickremesinghe's second job is on China, to convince New Delhi of its position. Colombo says it is not interested in camp politics. It wants to be neutral between India and China. But will India accept that? The Chinese have not abandoned their plans in Sri Lanka. They're back in the mix. Companies like China Harbour Corp and Sinopec are eyeing investments. Sinopec has already been shortlisted for a project, a $4 billion refinery near Hambantota. The fact is, Colombo needs China's help. Around 20% of their debt is owed to Beijing. So without them, there is no restructuring or rebuilding, and China knows that too. All of Sri Lanka's creditors have created a joint forum, sort of like a single window to renegotiate the debt. But guess who's staying away? The Chinese. They have refused to join the other creditors. They want to work out their own deal. It's fishy even by China's standards. So Wickremesinghe needs to convince New Delhi about the China factor. And all of this discussion is based on a very important assumption. The assumption that Sri Lanka will recover. Other countries can only help. In the end, Sri Lanka will have to do the heavy lifting. And there's a problem. A lot of them, a lot of Sri Lankans, are leaving the country. Around 150,000 Sri Lankans have left since January. The government says 300,000 people will have left by the end of this year, 2023. It's an exodus. Many of these people are going to Gulf countries, and the result is this. There is a labour shortage in Sri Lanka. Doctors, nurses, engineers, construction workers, all of them are in short supply. And without them, recovery will be tough. We talked about ports and refinery projects. You need people to build and operate them. So this brain drain and this loss of labour could derail the rebuilding process. What can Colombo do? They've already announced a plan to restructure domestic debt. The next step is to negotiate with foreign lenders. If all goes well, the IMF will help them. A $3 billion bailout has been struck. After a review in September, that money could be released. It's all about speed and time now. Wickremesinghe says it will be a long and hard road to recovery. But will his people stay around for the bitter pill? For our next story, let's talk about rejection. Whether in relationships or careers, rejection hurts. But when visa applications are rejected, the bite can be brutal. Not only because dreams of sunbathing by the ocean or hiking in mountain trails are squashed, but also because when visa applications are denied, it costs you money. And what price do Indians pay? About $10 million. Last year, Indians spent $10 million on Schengen visas. The visas they never got. I'll tell you what I'm talking about, but first, what's a Schengen visa? What is Schengen? It's an area comprising 27 countries in Europe, countries like Germany, Switzerland, and France. Now, to visit these countries, some non-Europeans, including Indians, need what's called the Schengen visa. It's a visa issued by one Schengen state, and then it's valid for traveling in any of the other 26 countries in the area. Now, we Indians love visiting Europe, so we apply for the visa. And last year, we loved the Schengen a little too hard. The visa saw a steep rise in applications from India, a 415% rise since pre-pandemic times. About 670,000 visa applications were filed by Indians, but more than 100,000 visas out of these were refused. That's a rejection rate of 18%. Feels like unrequited love, doesn't it? But let me tell you, this number is lower than the rate of 2021. In that year, 2021, the rejection rate was more than 23%. So is this cause for celebration? Not really. 18% is still higher than the worldwide average rejection rate, which stands at 17.9%. Not a big difference there, but it does matter because this rejection costs you money. When you apply for a visa, you're charged a fee. For the Schengen visa application, this amount is about $87. So Indians collectively have spent about $58 million on these applications last year. And when applications got rejected, Indians lost about $10 million. So much money lost to trips that never happened. The numbers do not look good. And if I put this into perspective, they will look worse. India got the second highest Schengen visa rejections in the world, second only to Algeria. In Algeria, in the case of Algeria, about 46% of the visas were turned down. It is brutal, but also not limited to Schengen by any means. Visas to countries like the US and the UK are also a pain point for many Indians. So why do these applications get rejected? For a number of reasons, like hiding your criminal background or submitting false information. But there's always more to it. A factor that does not help India's case, the strength of its passport. Because when it comes to passports, with great power comes a lot of travel. Meaning, the stronger the passport, the more countries you can visit, ideally without a visa. Japan has the world's strongest passport. The citizens of Japan can visit a whopping 193 countries without a visa. This is followed by Singapore and South Korea, where citizens can get access to 192 countries. And what is India's rank? 85th. India enjoys visa-free or visa-on-arrival travel to 59 countries. And the 85th rank looks poor, but let me tell you, it's an improvement. A slow and steady one, but an improvement for sure. It's also a sign of the changing times. Supporting the travelling Indians who are raring to go. In less than a decade, the government of India has issued more than 88 million fresh passports. And this trajectory is helping not just Indians. Visas also say a lot about engagement between countries. When Indians get visas, they engage with the countries they travel to. When Indians travel abroad, they help international economies. Indians spent over $12 billion on foreign travel last year, $12 billion in a year. And yet, getting a visa in India can be an unpleasant experience with a months-long wait and hectic documentation like proof of employment, your income and tax returns. All of this with no guarantee of success. Getting a visa is a gamble. Many are willing to play, but the question is, should they have to? And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. We're starting with Israel. The country's parliament has given its initial nod to Prime Minister Netanyahu's judicial overhaul plan, and this has triggered protests in several parts of the country. Meanwhile, a volcano has erupted in southwest Iceland. This happened after an intense earthquake activity in the area, and heavy rain has caused floods in the US state of Vermont. Finally, taking you back in history, on this day in the year 2006, a string of powerful explosions happened in India's financial capital, Mumbai. The blasts took place in local trains during evening rush hour. Nearly 200 people were killed and about 900 were injured. 9 years later, 5 convicts were given the death sentence. We're leaving you with that. Thanks for watching.